Hey, we are, my name is Tony, this is Shane, this is Christian. We're all in a community group together, and Shane actually is normally behind the camera. This is the first time he's in front of it, at least for something we're doing for the church.
Everything's backwards.
Yeah, exactly, things are bizarre. But we've been having conversations about the new normal. We've been talking a lot about it and about what it means for, during this whole coronavirus, to be faithful, to learn to love people, how fearful and how concerned should we be, and we've been having those talks, and they've been so engaging and so encouraging, at least for me, that I thought it was good for us to bring it beyond kind of our private circle and into a public sphere.
Yeah.
And so that's what tonight is. Tonight is just a conversation about what it all looks like. I have some questions, some prompts, but hopefully we go in whatever direction. Nothing's scripted. It's really free flowing. Hopefully we'll move in and out of discussions, and we'll find things that are meaningful, hopefully for one another and also for anybody who's listening.
So how's the scoring work? 10 points.
Yeah. Well, let me start with a question. Are you ready?
Okay.
So if you knew that this whole thing was coming, like let's say we backed up, 5 months, and you knew that the coronavirus was coming, how would you have prepared differently? Like faithful-wise, like your family, like how would you have prepared differently?
My first response or thought was, don't have a baby in the middle of a pandemic. So some of the things you don't think about, happening, maybe a little more planning, but.
You'd have to go back like 9 months.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like a book title. Don't have a baby in the pandemic.
All right, so I didn't do the math quite right. I just had that shock factor. What are the things I would do different? I think a lot of the things that kind of you learn in this, I don't know that there is anything you can do different, because you can't learn anything if you're not in the situation. I mean, you can, but you really learn the best when you're going through something. I mean, that's the whole reason we go through trials. Like, if you knew the trial wasn't coming, it's not a trial. Or if you knew the trial was coming, it's not a trial. So I think everything that we're learning, and we're learning it together. I think what's tough is that we're not together. So there's a little bit of a resistance there on how we could grow together. But I think things like this are, a great opportunity.
Everybody in the whole world is going through this new normal all at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
Like, you can't go back and find a book on this. Like, I guess you could read about the Spanish flu, but even so, like, it's not this in this modern time where technological advances are able for us to have this conversation like this and show it to the world or whatever. So Christian, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I think even now, like when we're talking about going back retroactively, we still kind of don't know what it is, right? So, like, what does preparation look like for a pandemic, which we really don't have a lot of really solid, concrete information on exactly how it's, like, we have some ideas about how it's spread, but a lot of it is really just leaning on the side of caution. I think it is hard to think about preparedness, and I think it just enlightens how out of control or how much we don't know. And I think probably the only thing you do different is it just makes you and enlightens you on all of the things that are so important to you in terms of your freedoms, like having a conversation with friends, or like going to a Bible study, or playing basketball, or things you might just do so normally that you don't connect them to like your health. You don't connect them to like what value they have in your world, because you do them without thinking. And then suddenly, like, you have to wear a face mask to walk into a grocery store, and like you have these limitations, and these things that you couldn't qualify in terms of how valuable they were are starting to speak to you in terms of how valuable they are for you.
Mm-hmm. When you said that, it just made me think of the first time I wore a mask in public. And like, I had this, like, because it didn't bother me, there's certain people it doesn't bother, certain people it does, but it didn't bother me up until that point. And then, I went out just because we had health concerns about, just concerns having a baby. And then I catch myself wearing it, and you're out in public, and it's like you're looking through goggles or something like this, you have this, and that just almost set like an emotional tone that totally changed this experience for me, almost in like one moment, that like, what is happening to the world?
Right.
I don't think I think a lot of things I experienced, there's not usually a defining point, but I think that might have been something, like kind of a defining point for me.
I'm still kind of, when we talk about the masks thing, I'm still, I want to do it to love people. Like, I've heard it all, like, right. I've read everything, I'm on it, like, I'm with it, wear the mask, save lives, it's not even for you, it's for other people. But there's still like something. I remember the first time I went to Costco, like, after this whole thing, and I was just trying to buy some toilet paper or whatever. I actually needed toilet paper. I wasn't like in search of toilet paper, So I wait in line, and it was before kind of the whole thing, but Costco still had a line, and and I saw 3 or 4 people with masks and gloves, and literally I was thinking, oh, like, you know, like I just rolled my eyes, sort of like self-righteous about the whole thing. And now it's like I'm wearing a mask, and now I feel like this is good, but I don't know. There's kind of this. I have a weird relationship with the mask. Like I still have a weird relationship with it. Yeah. But like, how are you guys feeling about like the mask? Like, are you wearing a mask? Like, where are you
I
at?
do. Unfortunately, I think like I happen to be a naturally playful person, so my son's in the backseat. He thinks he's a ninja, right? And like it's a thing for him. So he's having the time of his life. We have the time of our lives with it. I do think it's strange. It's a strange thing, and I think it just kind of reiterates to me like it's hard to give the right amount of gravity to all of these different practices because there's so much that we don't know. So like the concept is, okay, you wear a mask for safety, right? But we're still qualifying something in terms of coughing, sneezing. Like we kind of understand it, but we kind of don't. So it's hard, I think, to be super passionate about any one of these rules per se. And I think, so for me, like, I don't know, it's been simple. I just lay on the side of caution and I don't give it very much thought. And everything that, you know, we do, it's just kind of a game for us. So I don't put too much stock into it.
Yeah, I felt like a Maverick a couple times. Like, you know, we're about to go mock.
That's amazing.
I have it hanging from one ear.
That's
so
good.
I lock in.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and I also find myself like failing. Like, you know, when you try and do something new and you don't know what's involved, and you were kind of talking about this in the sermon, but you try something new and then you find out it's a lot harder. Like being sterile is not an easy thing.
Right.
Because then your mind starts going about all the ways that you're not like, but now this is contaminated, so I got to do this, but how do I do it with this when that's contaminated? I can't pick that up because I've already touched this, and like, how do I wash my hands before I touch my phone?
Right.
And then you just let your mind slip once because you've lived however long,
right,
not being contaminated, and then you're done.
Well, it's like the whole touch your touch your face thing. When we
it's like a sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
No, it's just a dumb joke.
No, it's a better joke.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but like when we all started this whole thing, the conversation was about like not touching your face, and like even in this discussion, I'm like, you know, like you can't stop it.
Gesture,
you know,
right.
So I don't know. There's all these things that are like sort of being told or expected of us that are still difficult. That are still difficult for me to even figure out how to live with,
right,
and experience.
Right.
And there's the other side of it, which just kind of leads us to the next thought, which is like. There's the faithfulness and the concern.
Right.
Like, the spectrum is so wide. Mm-hmm. Like, does faithfulness say, don't wear a mask because everything's going to be okay? Right. Or does, like, love for people and concern say, no, please put that on? Like, so I guess that's something to be thinking about. Like, where does that lie in the way you're thinking about this whole thing? Like, faithfulness versus concern and love for people.
So in terms of faithfulness, you mean faithfulness in terms of our belief about...
Yeah, great. Faithfulness that God is taking care of us and will be taking care of this disease and his children are in his hand, that whole thing.
Right. So I think it's such an interesting juxtaposition because I think there's a sense like where you want to be wise, and like I think wisdom is a gift from God, like medicine and like all of these things are gifts. So I think the ability to wear a mask because you can get one is a luxury. So I think, frankly, that one's easy for me. I think it would be a weird conversation with God post, you know, when you're in heaven and God's like, so like why, just out of curiosity, like why didn't you wear the mask? Like I provided them for you, like the brains to make them. It's just kind of weird. I just was on my mind. I can see that conversation being uncomfortable for me, so I'm wearing the mask. That's as deep as I
thought
it
cramped my style, you know. Like, but I breathed. It was too warm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, good reason.
I do live in South Florida.
But God's gonna be like, come on, bro. Shoulder punch.
I think I'd just be like, because you already knew what I was thinking, so it's just like, oh, so I was wrong.
Got it.
Sorry.
So I
Sorry about that.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying I should have been wearing the mask? Just so we're clear, yeah.
Yeah, I think it picks up where, you know, we kind of had a conversation, and I felt like there was an overlap in the sermon about, you know, you're supposed to have faith in God, but also, you know, you have steps that you're supposed to do in it as your own responsibility.
I think even the discussion that we were having beforehand, like maybe 2 weeks ago, was kind of like, how do we look at like the actual practical things that are happening right now, or the realities of what's happening right now, while also going, okay, like people are dying, and we're mourning for those families. Like, we're concerned about
Yeah.
them, we love them, and like we go, wow, that's scary. But also, how do we balance that with like, God is sovereign, gonna take care of this, like that's kind of difficult in Christian thought to even consider. Like, God, is he the orchestrator of this? Like, is he like? So anyway, what are some of the things that kind of come to mind?
I think that was a really interesting thought that I actually had earlier today, where I was like, man, like, so one of the questions that I constantly think is kind of an old, like, Stoic Roman kind of thought, but the idea is like, okay, like, your Christianity, your faith, your doctrine should always be answering the question, what does it look like to be Christian in this situation, right? Like, what does testimony look like in this particular situation? And I think the most powerful thing is to be, like, it's weird, but it's almost like the story of the gospel's, like, turmoil, and how doctrine and the gospel and the truth of the gospel paints something beautiful in a turmoil, like a tumultuous kind of canvas. And so for me, it's interesting, because the first thing that came to mind is like, you should be fearless in a way that is confusing to people. Like, people should see that in you, without necessarily pretending that the danger's fake, right? So like, I think that's the continuity that makes the fearless valuable. The fearlessness is valuable because we have a real respect that people are really dying, but a weird juxtaposition that's a celebratory thing if you know the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, you hammered on something that probably is worth a little bit more discussion, which is like,
loaded.
We should be fearless while also realizing that the concerns aren't fake, that death is real, that suffering is real.
And what does fearlessness look like?
Right,
I think
right.
Fearlessness looks like concern and empathy in this particular situation for how far you're willing to go for people.
That's so beautifully said.
That's just my thought on what you were saying, but you could take that in a lot of different directions, I suppose.
Yeah, like fearless in your willingness to sacrifice for people. Right. Because I think that's the other thing, is that like the gifts of God and the faithfulness that we've been given are not there to be used for our own self-promotion. They're not like, wow, look how I'm so fearless, that means I can not wear a mask. Right. I'm so fearless, that means I'm touching everybody because I know I'm not going to get coronavirus. Like, it's actually like, I'm so fearless that I will leave behind what makes me comfortable in order to provide care and concern for other people. Like, that's how fearless I am, that I would go to the hospital and serve in whatever way. Like, man, I appreciate so much, like, our frontline workers and all of the people who are striving so hard, who are living fearlessly, but in a fearlessly loving way. And I think that's maybe that's the direction, right? It's not like, wow, we're so fearless that we don't give a flip about people. No, actually, we're so fearless that we care about people in such a way that maybe it's a little bit more dangerous, or we step out of our comfort zone a little bit more, or we become people that maybe we weren't ever before. And I think that's I don't know, man. If we could, and if Christians could live that way in this time, like, our faith would just shine so brightly.
It's so well put. Like, and it's funny because while you were talking, what was in my mind is like, I think it's in Paul. I think he's talking to the Galatians, or he's in Thessalonica, and he's like, remember your great love, that you fearlessly accepted the plundering of your property, going to see the Christians who were being persecuted, and they plundered your property, and you sang, and it was a beautiful thing as you kind of let your property go so that you could love people. And the ironic thing about that whole picture is, like, I juxtapose that to the videos now of people fighting over like paper towels in the store. It's like, can you imagine like the difference where, if you take advantage of saying, you know what, like, I have confidence that we've got enough. Like, I'm not going to even think about like how many can we spare a square of toilet paper? Like, we're good. I don't have to count squares because my God is able to provide abundantly all the squares that we're going to need. Yeah. And since I have that springboard, since I'm rich, since I'm completely taken care of, that creates an unbelievable launch pad for me to go have as big an impact for other people as I possibly can. I don't have to think about myself.
Yeah. When there's not an income still, I mean, that's definitely like a faith that I guess people struggle in financial giving. When you have an income, it's like, how much of my income am I giving?
Right.
Now it's like, you have no income, but are you taken care of? Like, and then you go up against these things like when you're looking at unemployment or getting grants for whatever you're potentially, whatever opportunity you have, and then it's like, do I need this? Like, should I be really taking
Pursuing
advantage
this?
of this?
Right, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and you got to kind of, it's like a little heart check, whether or not you should be going down those roads.
It's kind of like the theme scripture of our church. It's like we're trying to be 2 Corinthians chapter 5. It's like we're trying to be a church not for ourselves, people not for ourselves. And I think in this moment, it's like we're really being tested. Who are we actually? Who are we really being? And yeah, I think if we're good givers when everything's good, then that's one thing. But if we're good givers when everything's terrible,
Right.
it's like, wow, that's a sign of fearlessness. That's
Right.
a sign of
Yeah.
faithfulness. And something I've been noticing is that my relationship with God looks a little bit like a chart that's sort of moving upwards, like a slope of a mountain or whatever, and it kind of like lifts, and it lifts for a long time. It lifts for a long time, and it goes like from one degree of glory to the next, whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it kind of gets to a peak, and it just like bottoms. It's like whenever I go through like significant challenges,
Yeah.
it's not like I take that smooth ride back down the hill. It's
Right.
like no, like
It's a cliff.
alarm,
It's a cliff,
like
yeah.
like I need the Federal Reserve to come bail me out,
Right.
that whole thing. And
Right.
so I feel like it was really, I really was doing well as in my own faithfulness and my own love for God as things were going better, as things were getting better and better and better, as life was normal. And then when life became this new normal, it was like a shock for me.
Yeah.
It's like everything that has happened has been challenging. I mentioned this today, but like Cadence is sick or gets injured, and I'm like angry at God, and like I'm trying to figure out times to pray, and it feels like my prayer life's just not where it ought to be. And I guess what I'm learning in the midst of this stuff is that like I need to learn to worship a God who is both in the hills and in the valleys, like both in the triumphs and in the suffering, both in the times when things are going wonderfully well and when things are going horribly wrong. And I think I've fallen in love with the idea of God being blue skies and rainbows and sunbeams from heaven.
Yep.
And I haven't fallen in love with God being, okay, I'm going to take care of my children by making things a little bit difficult and rubbing them. And like, I can say this all day long, like how much I believe that God does that. But when it happens to me, it's like so uncomfortable. And so I think that's what I'm learning. I'm learning to appreciate a God that is willing to, sort of like what Jesus did. I think it was in John chapter 6, where he sends the disciples out into the storm. I'm learning to appreciate the God who sends me out into the storm.
Right.
And being like, you don't have to explain yourself to me. The storm is a good place because then I find intimacy with you.
Right.
And I think this is the thing I'm learning during this time about my own relationship with God.
I think it's such an interesting insight too, because I think it's weird, because I think when we're in the everydayness, the moments of our lives, it's hard to appreciate that it's actually a story. And that if everything went perfectly well, like, this sounds weird, and I don't know, maybe you guys can jump in terms of how to think about it, but it's almost like the best thing about a God who's omnipotent and has this unbelievable love for you is that you can just jump off the cliff and you can be fearless. And so it's almost that like the struggle, the suffering all serves its purpose, and at the end you'll be happy to have the color, like when you are looking at it, I think there's a sense where you're happier that in and through all of this difficulty, like depth and breadth and the power of love is being displayed by the distance and by the suffering that it comes through, that it penetrates to find you. So in a weird way, I'm thinking of Paul, where he's like, we rejoice in our suffering, knowing that suffering proves, proven and hope and persistence and patience. And for me, in my mind, I'm like, I'm trying to find that balance where I don't want to say, like, I'm joyful because bad things are happening, but I don't want to be so disconnected from God's purpose for my life being a story that I am more concerned with the way this feels in the light and momentary kind of way, that I don't have the ability to have excitement about what God's going to do over the picture of my life.
Yeah. The shading produces the masterpieces,
Right.
you know, like when it's just black, white, or whatever.
Right.
I kind of think about the Inside Out movie, you know. We're all dads, we know. So like, but like
I watched it before I was a dad.
Yeah,
Yeah, me
yeah,
too.
so did I.
Confession.
I'm just saying that so it doesn't feel.
Are these coffees or are they like lemonades? Right?
these are Shirley Temple.
They're totally Shirley
Yeah. But I'm thinking about like that idea of like things are beautiful. Like I don't know when you're experiencing red, blue, yellow, the primary colors. It's like this is clear. But when those colors begin to mix and you're like, this is joy in suffering, it's like, I don't like that.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I don't like that. At least I don't like that right now.
Right.
Like, again, in future retrospect, you know, it will be glorious.
Right.
And it'll be like, wow, what we learned during this time was fantastic,
Right.
amazing, and life-changing. But like, while we're going through it, it's just hard to figure out those lessons.
Right.
That's just the truth of it.
So I think when we're talking about this, like when you were speaking before, and the more biblical example, I was thinking of like backbone, but it's really the rock. Like God, our foundation should be Christ, and we've made, you know, I think we all believe, you know, we're putting God first and He's our God, but like we were okay when the world, really we fit God into this world system. We were comfortable with God in this world system. Now it's like messed up.
Yeah.
So we realized that like, and now things are getting shaken up. We gotta take the pieces, put God at the center, and then build around it. But I think also what, you know, people keep, I think a lot of the conversation we'll be having right now is that we're all supposed to take time to reflect and check ourselves in our relationship with God and Christ, right? So we can pull back and, you know, do all that writhing. We come to a point of peace and maybe have these insights that we each have in our individual relationship with Him. But then how long does that last? Like, is it going to go back to the new normal, or to a new normal? Is it going to be a new normal? Or is it going to go back to the way it was? And are we going to keep this honeymoon period where we learned all these great things with God, and then we just go right back in and we lose sight of the things we've learned? Or are we going to really take stock of what we've learned and move forward with it? And if it's a new normal, then it might be easier to do, but then it might be easier to get discouraged and find ourselves off track in a different way. So
I guess it's always, I think that point that you just said about, like, we had built God into our system.
Right.
Like, and so when the system was removed, it almost feels like God was removed too,
Mm-hmm.
when in fact, like, God should have been the system.
Right.
So it doesn't matter.
it shouldn't have felt broken.
It shouldn't have felt, nothing should have felt broken. It should have felt like,
Oh, right.
like, oh, we're not going to work.
Right.
You know,
Right,
like,
right,
like,
right.
oh, we're no longer allowed to attend a church gathering with
Right.
all
Yeah.
the
We do
500
church
of our
online now.
friends. You know?
Right.
Yeah, like, oh, that's just normal. But for us, it was like catastrophic meltdown. You know, like, I mean, you can go on and on and on about the statistics about like domestic abuse and addictions and all that stuff, like skyrocketing. You're like,
Really?
oh, our hope was so tied to our system,
Right.
that we removed the system and we thought God went with it, you know. And I think that was such a deep thought, and I think it's good for me to reflect a little bit about that. And even as I'm communicating this, like the new normal, if God was in there and in here, then it's
the same normal,
it's
right?
the same
It's
normal.
the same normal.
It's the same normal. It just the peripheral stuff is kind of
gone.
changed.
Right.
We have new scenery.
New haircut.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
It's a new
right,
haircut
right.
or whatever. So.
Yeah, it's just the way of the world to have gravity pull you, this gravity that pulls you away from God. So I think if they're, you know, how different things are going to be, there's going to be things we all haven't experienced collectively that are going to be pulling us from God and maybe create divisions and factions and things like that. And I think it's just things to look out for, nothing to be concerned about, like in the fearless nature we've been talking about, but definitely things to maybe look forward, look towards in the future so that we can be prepared to sidestep them, avoid them, not avoid them, but, you know, go through
Confront
them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think
Facing that on.
the thing you said too that was really valuable is this idea of like this honeymoon period, right? Like, if you are now currently maybe getting in your Bible in the way you weren't, if you have taken advantage to find some quiet time, if the disruption of these other things in your life have made you reprioritize and say, okay, like, nothing should be able to be taken out of my life that makes me feel uncentered. If God is the king of the universe and I'm his child, like, there should be nothing peripheral. So if you've come to those convictions and now you're in a place where you are basically re-engaged in that relationship where God's been the entire time, then like what stops it from being a honeymoon period when work gets reintroduced and then, the kids are going to school and you have, the driving time significantly more. And I think the interesting thing too is I think what tends to, like when I think about that challenge about like, I guess the context is passion or zeal, I think it's like the idea of time is I think what makes it scary. The idea of like, so if you said like if your Christian life was a 24-hour period, like what would it look like? I think, and this is maybe, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like we could be ceaseless in prayer for 24 hours. I feel like we could be like really courageous and really engage with the truth of the gospel for that period of time. And I think what's the thought, at least the idea that's helpful to me there is just to remember, like when Moses said, Lord, help us, give us a heart of wisdom to count the days, is not to think of your existence as more than 24 hours. Don't assume more than 24 hours and just be present in the moment. And then like in every moment where you have a God who created the universe, who's working everything out for your good, and his only command to you is, hey, look, I have you completely covered so that you can go be fearless, like go pursue love, go weep with the weepers, go like you can go, like so you can serve me with zeal. I think that for me, it's a moment by moment gut check. Like, okay, I can do that now. Like in this conversation, I can be fully engaged. I can do that when I get home. Like I can think of the most loving thing to say to my wife, the most loving thing that like, how can I most be Christ? Like how can I die here in this situation aggressively over the span of a short period of time? But the moment I think about like the idea that I have to do this for 60 years to live well, I think that's when things get daunting and you start to have ideas of forgetfulness and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, even that thought, like this moment is, so we left our old normal, we went into a new normal, and if our hope moved from that old system to this new system, like now we're like, wow, I love working from home.
Right.
So my hope is now in working from home.
Right.
Like it's not even like my hope was centered in Christ. It was like, oh, you moved me. Okay, I could find some other random place.
Correct.
Like, and then like, oh, we're back to work. Okay, so this now not working from home is crushing.
Disruptive. Right.
It ruined me. But I think the fact is that, and what you're speaking to, that kind of makes me think is that these transitions are the most difficult part. The transition even from today to tomorrow is difficult, because tonight I can make a decision. I can go, I'm going to be faithful for the rest of the night. I go to sleep, that decision needs to be remade. That's the thought about like,
exactly
dying to yourself daily. And it's like, and then tomorrow there's a new transition. I need to die to myself for this day and for this season and then for next year. And it's like, it becomes a lot. But I think if we kind of center ourselves in this idea that our transition, rather the way we think about life, going, okay, I want my life to be fixated on God solely. He is the only thing that provides anything for me that will allow me to really rest on. He is the rock of my salvation, my stronghold. When the winds come, if my life is built on the fact that today was good and tomorrow's terrible or whatever, it's going to all fall and crumble. And it's like, man, the words of Jesus are kind of speaking to me during this time. And not only is this discussion, but during this season. I'm like, wow, we have not done what we ought to do, but at least we have an opportunity to change it.
Right.
And I think, I mean, we all know, and especially in this church, it's very evident, fellowship and being together and community, and those things, and like having conversations like this that we're really not. We still have the opportunity to take advantage of these things with Zoom and technology and phone calls and stuff, but like it also. You have the opportunity to not do it.
Right.
Yeah, like you could watch online, or you could not
watch
online.
And not to, it might not even be intentional. Like you just don't do it, and then you fall into it, and it's like, well, I haven't reached out in a long time. It'd be awkward now, or something like that. And
these are real thoughts.
Yeah. So, I just think that missing the community of the church being brought together regularly is a hurdle to overcome. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's just so many opportunities to fall into ruts in this, whether it's watching the news, looking at financial stuff, lose distractions to replace it with new ones. And I got to be honest, I don't think that I've really come to a place where I'm put God totally fully centered yet. I think I'm still ebbing and flowing, kind of getting a little closer there. And not that, that's the whole struggle of our Christian walk is to do that. But I still think he's got me just sitting still a little bit longer, before I'm gonna finally just look up and wait,
Yeah, that's good. Let me give 2 quick closing questions,
Sure.
and we can see how long they last. But first one is this: as dads, we're all dads. Micah, Carter, Cadence, and Ezra. We have wonderful children at home. Like, how are we managing some of that stuff? Like, are we telling
early
our kids?
bedtimes?
Yeah. Are we telling our kids about it? Like, that people are sick? Like, how is that? How are those conversations going? And how difficult has that been to manage?
I think I've got a rule where I always tell Micah the truth, and as much as it's helpful. So still from a standpoint of, but I think life is stranger than fiction, and it's been really interesting. Like, he will get up in the morning, and sometimes he'll say, "Daddy, I don't go to school with coronavirus." Like, he'll say it, and it's just so cute coming out. It's like he has no idea what he's talking about. But I do think there is something, like, I don't know, I feel like over a long period of time, just the experience of being alive, the experience of just life in general is a story. And I think as much as I can have him engaged and understand and work with him to understand things well, we talk about, like, okay, like, we put these masks on, like, this is why. And, I explain to him, like, at some point, like, you're going to want to think about how to protect people and how to keep other people safe and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting, I think, even for me as his father, in a place where he's really interested in, like, heroes and police and firefighters. Like, it's just a really good, pure place to watch him exhibit his thoughts and feelings on. I'm like, so how would you keep people safe? Like, what would you do to be prepared? And to watch from his perspective, really just what the experience of life is.
It's really, it's got to be cool to have a conversation with your kid in general. My daughter's less than 2 years old, so we're not having conversations. But I mean,
well,
you definitely
right? Like, about not going places.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely different insights you have, perspectives you wouldn't have unless you had a kid at whatever age it is going through this. Just, she would be with her friends playing every day, and it's like at the beginning she was asking for her friends all the time. Now she's with mom and dad all the time, so she doesn't want to go anywhere. And if one of us leaves the room, she's losing it.
That's awesome.
No, it's not.
I can hear her crying from here.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But no, just, when she can't go play with this person's puppy, and it's like, not because I just don't know if they want you to play with the puppy. Right. And then, like, you have these, like, gray areas of, like, is it okay if she plays with the puppy?
Right.
Okay, cool. And then, but then protecting her and not letting her. So, yeah, just those kind of things make me think, like, man, I just don't want my things to really change that much to where my kid doesn't have the opportunity to grow up in a world where you could be near people and approach people because you wanted to talk to them, because you're people and we're, relational creatures. I think just those little things of her not being able to be around her grandma who, whatever, because we're trying to quarantine for the baby at the hospital. It's just an odd thing. And I think more than anything, having, the mask situation, putting on a mask in public, but having, my daughter and, steering her away from people, right? And those just made me more concerned about the future and, like, what could happen than I think I would have been without a daughter.
Yeah, we've, Cadence, our 2-year-old, we've been talking to a lot about things because she can't go to school. We go to the school here at Broward Christian Academy, but she can't come. And so we told her the reason you can't come is because people are sick. And she doesn't understand it. And we went to the store, her and I, and she sees all the people with the masks, and she goes, "People are sick." And she's repeating this phrase that people are sick. And the other day, we were driving. We were driving, and she saw a bunch of people outside, and she said, "Poppy, people aren't sick anymore." And, like, making this sort of, like, we see they're out, they're moving, they don't have masks on, and it's heart-wrenching right now to hear. Every night we pray for the people who are hurting. She doesn't even know what she's praying for, but she's praying and trying to teach her to be compassionate in this time. And anyway, but it's heart-wrenching. It's difficult. I can only imagine having older children and having to really explain it. But for her, she's like, she just wants the people to be better, so she could have her birthday party or whatever. Or she'd go back to school, but that's been challenging. And on kind of a lighter note, and I guess this will be our last question. as men, we have lots of energy and we're working still in some capacities at least. What are you doing to pass the time, like just for fun? Like what's like a fun, what are you doing?
So I don't know. I feel like this is
Marble
weird.
Olympics is what everyone's
Marble
doing.
Olympics are awesome.
Is that a real thing? You said that
it's a
it's
real
you need to-
thing.
you need to
Get
watch
into it. Just
Marble
search
Olympics.
the sand.
Oh my God.
It's amazing on the sand. For me, it's weird. I happen to be working from home more. Probably I'm as, if not more, busy in terms of just work in general. But I do find I'm working out more. I'm spending more time having tickle battles with Micah, which is amazing. And it's a very interesting dynamic because he could be running the bath and I could be on the phone with a customer, and I'm like, and they can kind of hear it and they kind of know too. So it's a different thing. He'll just come over for a random hug, which is cool. Yeah. But I find I don't know, I kind of stay active. So in the morning I'll get up and I'll go run. And I've had the thought in my mind, like, all right, am I going to run with the mask on? But if you've been shopping with the mask on and you've inhaled that thing, I'm not that intense. I try to stay in shape, but that's rough. So I don't know. I feel like, in a weird way, I think we all probably have a little bit of cabin fever. Like we all sometimes it is good just get in the car and drive and kind of get out. But yeah,
I try to
just
get
make
my
bad
daughter.
excuses.
My daughter, she'll say keys, and she wants to go play in the car like it's a fake car, and I'm like, keys? I'm like, you want to go on a ride? Let's go on a ride.
That's amazing.
Being guys and everything. I picked up gardening. I'm not even kidding.
It's awesome.
But it's kind of fun because it's such a slow progression as all of this has been. So if you have not picked up gardening and you're just running wild, like you're just like wondering what to do, I suggest you do it because it's such a slow process. And you can just wake up every day and the slowest little growth out of these little vegetables, you're just fired.
Lights your fire.
No,
Lights
you're
Especially
your
when
fire.
you've never done it before.
Right.
I'm probably doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
but
They're like all
this is
weeds.
gonna be a
It's not even the
tomato.
vegetable.
This is going to be a tomato.
If I can make one sandwich.
That would be
I'm going.
amazing.
Yeah, that'll be like
That's
the
cool.
kickoff. Like, I got to get a sandwich before this quarantine's up.
That's amazing.
I've been doing a lot of stuff in the yard too.
Yeah.
Like try to work on my grass. Like I care more about grass now than I ever have before. Like I know the difference between Bermuda and St. Augustine. Like
awesome.
who cares?
But what is that?
Yeah,
That's really the
exactly.
question.
I'm like, that's a crabgrass. That's a weed. Like what is that?
What is that?
Nice
Yeah,
lawn.
yeah, right, exactly. So that, and then also I've been doing a lot of like woodworking, carpentry, like
super
building
cool.
stuff,
Yeah.
and doing it. I'm doing it because I'm so I want to do something.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just don't want to sit around and do nothing. And I feel so like if I'm just sitting at home watching Tiger King, like I feel like such a loser. Even though I know it's okay,
Right.
like I just feel so like I need to do something.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's a little bit of what I'm doing.
It's been fun to find, like, I'm work at home a lot anyway, so I'm usually with my daughter, but to some capacity. But now it's like you run out of the things that you usually do, like a couple things each day to, whatever they're interested in at the time. And that you run out of that real quick.
Yep,
So
yep.
you're looking for all kinds of new things to have fun. And I think when you're stressed trying to find new things and your kid needs attention, you're not so great at being creative. But then when it's just like,
Relax.
yeah, you relax, and then you're like, let's try this. And so doing new things has been really fun with her, like even just coloring in a different way. Usually I just let her color, but then I was coloring with her and having her color in my shapes, and that was cool. We taped some cardboard together and made a slide on the stairs.
Oh, super
Whoa,
cool.
look
at you.
Super cool. That's
Bring out the
A1.
camping gear. They like the tent.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Cassandra and I put a tent in the house
Yeah,
too.
we made a fort in the living room.
It gets
Yeah,
about a
four
day
in the
and a
living room.
half.
It's about the
Like,
same
yeah.
thing.
Then it's
Yeah,
just
then you're
sitting
like,
there
why
not
is there a
used.
tent in my
Yeah,
house?
yeah.
and I know, like we all really very much appreciate our wives right now. Like
Oh,
our
yeah.
wives are like A++++ right now. Like, man, if we could. Mother's Day is coming up. You better do something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, like, are
I
we
don't know.
still
I don't know if that's a
quarantined?
part of our discussion.
No,
if that was
that's the
just
thing.
me discipling you.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
like I need to do something too.
I don't
so.
even know what day it is, and like Katie's gonna appreciate.
Yeah, I think
that.
it's
Yeah.
May,
Yeah.
May 10th. Yeah, but like our wives have been so amazing and so great, and this has been really great. I'm very encouraged to be able to sit with friends
Yeah,
and
like,
talk
this is
through
fun.
things, and I know I've been inspired and enlightened by some of the things you guys shared, and I hope that all of you watching, I've been edified. And if this has been encouraging for you, or if you felt like you've gotten anything from this, why don't you take a second? You can share these posts, and maybe they might spark some interest in God in some of your friends or your coworkers or your neighbors, and beyond that, like, this is such an awesome opportunity to reach more people for Jesus, to be able to plant more seeds in Shane's garden, but in the garden of the kingdom, to be able to plant more seeds and let God grow it. And so, if you're feeling a little bit in doubt about how you can have an impact during this time, I think there are so many more opportunities than maybe even you think. And so, do it. Just go after it. Maybe pursue praying more and reading more and trying to figure out how to center Christ as your main foundation in life. And I think some of the things that we mentioned today, I think could be, if we put them into action, life changing. So anyway, it's been awesome to spend this time with you. It's been awesome to spend time with you guys. I love this time together, and we'll see you next time.